Thank you all for being here. Okay, so this is what, week 5, day, let me check. Just looking at it. Day 24, week 6 of the work-based learning program. Last one for this week before we get into business planning and goal setting in the next 2 weeks. Really excited that Ricardo from Sustainable Economies Law Center and Adrionna from Mandela Grocery. They're involved in a lot of other things. I'm hoping we can give you both some time to do a short intro. But really glad that you all came in to talk about like policies and practices and, to have a conversation about, what it looks like in the real world to do this stuff. So yeah, big thanks to you all for coming. It seems as if Adriana's video may be frozen, at least on my side. Oh, no, there you go. Would you like to go first? Just give yourself a little introduction.
Sure. My name is Adrionna Fike, one of the members at Mandela Grocery Cooperative. I've been there for almost 10 years now, so February to be 10 years. And I'm on a bunch of committees, hiring committee, marketing committee, HR at large. We have, so a lot going on a lot of committees, and still learning every day. Policy is absolutely powerful, and ultimate source of accountability for us. Excited to get into it.
Bless. Would you like to go next, Ricardo?
Sure, thanks. I'm Ricardo Nunez. I'm Director of Economic Democracy at the Sustainable Economies Law Center. Oakland, California is my home, but right now I'm on a little journey and I'm in Puerto Rico. And seeing some of the solidarity economy, mutual aid things that they got here. And as far as like policies, interested to like get into it. And like Adriana said, it definitely is a source of accountability and trying to align policies with the vision of cooperative principles and values is a difficult task. It's a practice. It's a constant learning. So which growth can be difficult, but ultimately I think it'll make us more full human beings and better workplaces. So I'll stop that for now. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you both. I think that leads me into the first question that I wanted to ask, which was like if you both could talk about the struggles in finding the right policy for your co-op. Because I guess like there's this analogy of like building the plane while flying it, and we're like already jumping in and then like figuring it out as we go oftentimes. So just hoping you all could speak to how like that feels or like how it's worked out for your respective organizations.
Adriana, do you want to go first? Or do you want me to?
Either way, go ahead.
Okay.
Say something. Start us off.
What was it? I think one of the things that I always try to keep in mind is we're creating policies at the Sustainable Economies Law Center, which is a democratic workplace, even though it's a nonprofit. So it's a staff collective, and we distribute and delegate authority and power across the organization. I think one of the things for writing policies, just as like an entry point that I like to keep in mind, is what are the values that the policy is trying to enable or to support, and sort of starting with that as the grounding of it, so that as you write the policy or as the policy changes in the future because it's amended or it's evolving, that there are some like written down or articulated like principles or values that's the reason this policy exists, so that people can keep coming back to that place when they're when the policies need to be changed or updated.
I mean, for us, policy, we create policy that aligns with our business goals. It aligns with our founding principles, the reason why we exist. So our policies must directly speak to those factors and those principles. We create policy to solve problems. So governance, sort of the governance issues and challenges, as well as on another layer is the management challenges. So there's policy formation for governance, how we be with community, how we be with one another. And then there's the policy formation for how we operate as a business with a day-to-day task. So for example, on the governance and the bigger, the governance scale, we create policy. For example, in our bylaws, it states that every first Monday morning of the month, we meet as members at 7 a.m. Like it says it in our bylaws. And we do that. And we actually meet twice a month on the Monday at 7 a.m. But at least we're meeting every single Monday as a full membership at 7 a.m. every Monday of the month. So that sets up the conditions and environment for a lot of building and development right there. It's a platform policy, boom. And then on another tier in the operations space or management tier, things like, the variant is surging again, it's surging. So it's like yesterday we're thinking, should we go back to limiting 5 customers in the store at a time? So on that management day-to-day scale, we're making, thinking about and making policy. Sometimes I wouldn't say on the fly, we do have a process for that, but it is a different window of decision-making than on the larger governance scale. So there are a couple of scales of policy-making that we, use at Mandela. So yeah, for setting boundaries, for safety, and also boundaries for decision-making, like our policies that we create facilitates our decision-making process, kind of makes for a more easeful decision-making process because we have these policies, thoughtful policies that we've put in place.
Yeah, and just to follow up, I think a lot of worker co-ops or democratic organizations, when they're starting, sometimes they can get bogged down in trying to write all of the policies and they just get so into it, as opposed to just creating just enough structure, just enough policies to get going and to start moving, so that there's like that open space to adapt and evolve. But a lot of, and I don't know if it's like just the folks that are part of worker co-ops or like to start worker co-ops or something like that, but definitely I've seen it multiple times where people starting a co-op or converting to a worker co-op will like try to think of every potential outcome and then like write all the policies for it. And like every workplace is different. So even if there's sample bylaws or operating agreements that people look to and refer from, like those were all created over time for that specific worker co-op. And so really like one of the things that I recommend people to do is just to create just enough policy and structure so that everybody sort of knows, like Adrionna was talking about, that like the boundaries exist. And so where do those, how far can you go before you need to like get permission or consent from like the other staff or change a policy?
Right. And on that note, I want to add to that point, because that's crucial. Like we started with bylaws and policies that were templates pretty much. And we've been working to adapt those ever since. And when was that? Maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, we started connecting with Rainbow in a deeper way. So Rainbow Groceries in the same industry as us. Rainbow was gracious enough to give us a hard copy of their policy book, like their whole policy manual. And what we did initially as the HR committee, we went through that whole manual and just highlighted the policy that was most relevant to us. So we already had these bylaws that we received as a template, sort of adopted, legally, all that stuff. So that was the platform to sort of build and customize for ourselves over time. So we've been open for 12 years. We've been crafting this policy over time, but it was really when we got Rainbow's policy book and we were able to highlight things specifically for grocery cooperatives. It was so relevant, taking things from, their, I don't know what they call it, discipline or something like that, accountability, taking things from there that were most relevant to us and adapting it, really deliberating on those points and adapting it to fit our needs. Because they're 250 members and we're, 8. So obviously there's going to be some differences there in how we handle and deliberate on things, but definitely helpful to source within your industry when crafting and adapting policy.
Yeah, thank you both. You've already gone through the other 2 questions that I had written down or, wanted to get your expertise on. So I'm gonna suggest that the cohort start getting on deck with questions or things that they'd like to ask you all. My last question is, if you all can talk to policies or practices that have helped relieve tension in your organization. I know some of the folks in our cohort have experienced some stuff and are curious about it, and then I'm just kind of tension averse, so I'm always curious how other folks are handling it. Would you like to go first, Adrionna?
Sure. I would say, let me turn this up. I would say that our process for creating policy is a tension reliever in it of itself, because so we adopted this process from the Arizmendi Association. And it's so solving a problem, attending to an issue, thinking through either as an individual, you have an idea that comes up, or thinking through as an individual or in a committee session, or just a group of folks coming together to think about how to solve this problem. You create a proposal that is very well thought out. So we're not just throwing out ideas and we should do this, you didn't, it's not like that. It's okay, you have to think it through. Really, what is it that you're trying to solve? What are you trying to get from it? What's the outcome? What's the problem you're solving for? Just really understanding that and the ramifications it's going to have on, the financial ramifications, the scheduling, the people, this person, understanding that this person has a child they need to pick up at this time. Just thinking about all the factors, taking a real global view of the organization and being okay, I'm going to propose, or we're going to propose this policy and put it out in an email. So our process is we put it in writing, send the policy in writing at least 10 days before our next general meeting. So we give one another time to read it. People can ask questions to what you've proposed, in the comments. We usually do it in a Google document. You can have comments, questions, whatnot. You're getting ready and you're deliberating over these folks' ideas and their proposal. So there's that process of engagement. And then our secretary puts that proposal piece on the agenda for that next general meeting where it fits, giving it enough time to start deliberating over it. And we can sort of, the process of, is this a point where we can make a decision, or does this warrant more conversation or more research? We're able to come to that proposal informed and questioning. So everybody has the opportunity to look at it, see, even talk about it amongst yourselves, you know what I mean? Shop it around so that the person who's proposing it can add to it and make adjustments and whatnot. So it's a very transparent process. It does take time. It's not you can't get frustrated and think that your proposal is going to move through overnight, because it's not going to happen. You know what I mean? So it allows patience on everyone's end. And then when we get into the meeting, we deliberate, like we have discussion. We build consensus through discussion, just asking questions, interrogating it. We have one person that asks every single question. She likes to go in and ask all the questions, and we're prepared for that. It allows people to really be themselves when in the policy formation process. So that discussion. And then if we have consensus, we go to our voting process. Everybody has one vote on it. And if it's, if it's majority, we go for it. We talk about why. That's another thing that we do. I don't know if Arismendi does it, but after we agree to something, we kind of discuss afterwards, like why, like what do we see we're going to gain from this and things like that. Yeah, but there's a lot more to it, but that's pretty much the gist of it, and the gist of it is grounded in discussion and very thoughtful, deliberation as the person proposing the policy. Yeah, just put in that energy and time and research if needed, as needed. So that relieves a lot of tension for us because there's a lot of time to have conversation, and sort of just tease out a lot of the points of contention or tension.
Yeah, that's I think one of the things that what Adrionna was saying is bringing up for me is just like recognizing the different personalities that exist, especially if it's like a smaller size co-op, and that like recognizing the individual differences of the members and using the differences like wisely is important in how to navigate these things. So like at the law center, because we've always been a semi-remote or remote workplace, there aren't a lot of times where we're all hanging out in the same physical location and just being able to like bounce ideas off of each other in like a really informal way as we're thinking of policies and things. And so what we've done is created intentional spaces where when there's a tension that arises or something like that, or some issue that should have a policy so that we know how to navigate those situations in the future, but there's differences of opinions on how to do that. We've created intentional spaces where we're actually, if you like think about the iceberg, and maybe the policy is trying to address the tension, and the tension is like the tip of the iceberg, but there's all the stuff underneath it, of everybody's like emotions and what that tension means to them and all these types of things, and or what the policy that somebody might be proposing means for them. It's like creating spaces where people can just describe the impact or the tensions that they're feeling, and it's just a space to listen. Like you're not there to solve any problems, you're not there to fix anything, you're just there to listen, to understand where your different coworkers and comrades are coming from, so that whoever is the person trying to draft this policy, that they can understand where people are coming from in a more like Adrionna was saying, like holistic and way. So that's one thing that we've done, that we've had to do because of our remote sort of situation, is to create those intentional spaces where all we're doing is really listening to each other, without trying to fix anything, solve anything, or shame or blame or guilt anybody because of like past actions. So yeah, that's one way that we resolve some of the tensions.
Thank you both. That was really, really helpful. All right, who wants to get a question into the conversation? We've got about 9 minutes left, and the floor is yours, Cohort. You can unmute or put it in the chat. Are you with us, Tut? Okay.
Blessings, everyone. I do have a question, because most of my questions are answered already, just listening through what they were saying about, the the governance and everything, and just how setting everything up. I wanted to know, does when it comes to the the tension relieving of everything, does the personality roles and how the behavioral parts of how people are in the co-ops, does that play a position of how they're positioned in the circle?
Sorry, you asking like, does the position, like how long they've been there, there's sort of like relative power to other people
Yeah,
affect the,
as far as like decision making when it comes to that part.
Adrionna, you want to start?
Sure. Guess I can say from the culture that we have is that we have, it's a challenge because we definitely we aspire to hold equal, I don't want to say expectations, but yeah, expectations of each one of us, no matter how long we've been members and even candidates, to really rise to each occasion, as equal. That's what we aspire to, and that's what we hope for, and that's what we encourage. So we know that there are folks that speak less. And we also know, because we know them as people, because we're around each other all the time, is that the same people think deeply. So we allow space, like there's times there's silence at times, you know what I mean? And we don't push anybody to do anything, but we ask, such and such, what do you think about this? And a lot of us are self-aware at this point, and we know that we talk a lot. So it's like, okay, let me let me let me back up a little bit and just give space for someone else to have time to come into this conversation fully. So I think it's the culture that you all cultivate, and a level of self-awareness that takes practice and time. So that's just kind of how we move through. We definitely have personalities that at times conflict, but we pay enough attention to one another, and we try to be friend. I want to say friendship is the word that keeps coming into my head, but it's true. Like, we try to really cultivate a family dynamic. That's something that we all have in common, is that we want that. So we just allow people to be their full selves, knowing that somebody may have something brewing, and we just let it kind of ease on out and give space for that, and it's not like we're not running into clashes. We're just kind of yielding space and power and recognizing those tensions and, kind of moving with that. So yeah, that's what I have to say. Just like awareness of the energies and the personalities, especially oneself.
Yeah. Yeah, the power dynamics piece is difficult, because in a democratic space, like Adrionna was saying, we're trying to create like an equitable, equal sort of playing field for everybody to be able to participate and exercise their power. That's like part of the powerful thing about co-ops, is that it does allow people to step into their own power. And so when it comes to navigating power dynamics, whether it's race, whether it's class, whether it's how long the person has been at the co-op, it's the thing that we usually advise people to do is to create some processes, and so the policies can support those processes, to really acknowledge and make explicit those power dynamics. And there's this article that was written during the 70s by a radical feminist author, talking about the tyranny of structurelessness. And basically it's like, there were all these sort of anarchist and leftist spaces that were being created. And in those spaces, they're like, there's no leaders here. We're leaderless. And so there's no power dynamic, or like, so, everybody's supposed to be equal, but then there'd be people who would like take up all the time talking, and they wouldn't step up their listening. They would just keep like using their positionality and power to direct the collective in the way that they wanted it to go, without giving people the space to really step into their own power and help shape the collective itself. And it was even more harmful because people couldn't even say that there was like a power dynamic, because when they even said it, it was like, no, we're leaderless. So like try to make structures and policies that like lift up those tensions or those power dynamics in a way that isn't about attacking the person who's been there the longest or whatever, but it's just about acknowledging it, so that hopefully the person, like Adrionna is saying, like is self-aware enough to like cede space. And if they don't, then hopefully there's some folks that can call them in to like step up their listening. So we have like these things that we took from the Arizmendi Association, which is these communication profiles about like, how do people like to receive feedback? If there's a conflict between this person and that, like between myself and somebody else, how do I want to receive that feedback? Do I want to receive it in the moment? Do I want to receive it after we're done with our shifts or whatever? So that can also help like understand how people want to receive that feedback and how to navigate some of those power dynamics. And the last thing I'll say about this is sometimes sometimes some people are just not going to be comfortable speaking in a space with somebody who's held a certain type of power or exercised power in a certain way. And so sometimes it's sometimes you got to ask to create a space where that person isn't there, so that other people can feel comfortable sharing their truths. So yeah.
Thank you both. There's maybe a good closeout question about like motivations for getting into a co-op, as well as like your favorite experience inside of a co-op. I'm seeing that someone's asking like, what's the supplement for we're leaderless? They're saying they missed it. I would argue that like the policies and practices, like this whole Q&A is kind of like getting towards that. But Ricardo was saying like specifically creating spaces to acknowledge hidden power dynamics, so that even if like it's a flat leaderless, circle organization, there's a way to call people in and not have like the loudest person in the room, direct the people just because they're the loudest. Would you all like to close out with that question about your favorite experience or motivation for getting into co-ops?
Adrionna, you want me to start or you want to go? I'll start. Okay. I got into co-ops when I was in Zambia for 2.5 years in the Peace Corps. And when I was there at my first village meeting in a rural village that I lived, I was saying, I'm here to do stuff that Peace Corps wants me to do, but like what I want to do is support whatever the community wants to do. And so if folks want to do something, like I'm here to support it any way I can. And a group of women stood up and said, we want to start a women's cooperative. And I said, sure, I'll help. And I didn't know what a co-op was. So for the next 2+ years, they taught me actually the power of cooperatives and seeing a group of women come together and create both economic independence from the men who held the like power over the money in the family, because they were the ones going to sell their agricultural produce and things, that the women could have some economic independence, but then also start organizing themselves and having political power in the communities themselves and advocating them for themselves on these very local levels was a really powerful thing that attracted me to cooperatives in the first place. And since then, I've just seen the transformative effect of cooperatives on people. Some people, they'll spend some time in a cooperative and it's not for them, and that's fine. And whether or not they stay within cooperative spaces or move out, I've seen everyone be transformed in their experience because they have a lived experience of actually trying to navigate the contradictions within a white supremacist, late capitalist society that is telling us that we should be one thing when our bodies and our souls and the earth is telling us that that is not working. And so I think this is just, for me, one of the things that a motivation for me is that this is a step in the direction of us creating that just transition and stepping into a space of restoration and repair in a way that can meet our needs right now. So
Right on. Beautiful. Yeah, I didn't have an awareness of cooperatives technically before I got into them. You know, I moved to West Oakland about 11 years ago, and I lived really close to the co-op, and a friend said, you know, there's a Black-owned grocery store around the corner from where you're moving to. And I said, oh yeah, you know, I went to check it out. Was totally into it, and have always been interested, well, not always, but since, you know, maybe a little before college, interested in Black people having control over our food. You know what I mean? It's like, why, why not, sort of thing. So I got into, you know, just learning about cooperatives when I started going to the store. I started reading up on them. There was a job for, you know, posting for hire, and I applied. And then it wasn't until a year and a half later that somebody called me and asked me if I wanted to interview. And I was available to do that. And I got into it, and I feel like I had an immediate, almost immediate, like embodied understanding of how to function within a cooperative, coming from a place of team sports. I played sports growing up my whole life, you know, all the way through and into college. And it felt like sort of a natural progression, you know, to be like on a team of, you know, people on the team, just a member. It's not a solo sport, you know what I mean? So getting into it and negotiating and reading, you know, following the ball and saving it from going out of bounds, just like translating, applying a lot of those skills that I brought from team sports into the workplace, into business, and to that whole notion and ethos of Black people having control over our food. And I've been getting so into it and learning more about economic democracy as a whole, and starting to study those concepts more so. And, you know, like food is a core space to begin to learn and understand how systems and structures work and flow. And so I'm just kind of like, my mind is expanding, you know, with good food and beyond food, to touch on all other aspects of life and humanity. So yeah, it's been good. I'm motivated just by that, just like feeling the wellness that is, you know, cyclical, you know, putting in good things and sort of putting out crap sometimes, but, you know, trying to, you know, put in what's good and learn from everything around me. And take the, you know, take the L's, you know. So I've, you know, and L's is stands for learning now. It's like I used to hear L and think of, you know, that's a loss, or you failed, or you made that mistake, or you never recover. No, it's like that's such a learning opportunity. And especially within the cooperative community, like we give one another the space to make mistakes and learn from them and demonstrate what we will do differently going forward. So I'm motivated by that, by staying well and getting better for community, with community, as community.
Asha. Thank y'all so much for staying a few minutes over and for, you know, adding that last sprinkles to the conversation. Really appreciate y'all, and, you know, looking forward to, you know, continuing the work with you. Thank you again, and Cohort. We'll see you on Monday.
thanks, Adrionna. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you. Nice seeing you, Ricardo.
Yeah, likewise.
Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.